talking about Camp Kirk. So that's what we said right off the beginning. And Henry O'Day, I hope I pronounced it correctly, the Executive Director of Camp Kirk is joining us. It's so great to have you here.
It's great to be here, Pam. Thank you.
And we've still got Lynn Zeraldo with us, and Lynn is the Executive Director of the Learning Disabilities Association here in York Region. How does that tie into Camp Kirk?
Well, actually, Lynn and Camp Kirk have a long-standing relationship. When the camp started in 1993, the Lions and Lioness of District A17, and many of those clubs are located in York Region, were instrumental in the beginning of the Camp Kirk. Camp Kirk is located in Kirkfield, and the first group of Lions that were involved were in Richmond Hill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And Lynn was the representative of LDAO at the time and was very much involved in the initial planning for Camp Kirk. I came on board a little bit later after all of the dirty work was done.
Yeah.
I came upon. Well, exactly, and so I came on board, I guess, in about, well, the first time I was approached was in 1989, when the camp was just sort of a segment of someone's imagination, and then progressively got more and more involved, and finally, when once the camp was built, the Lions Club built the camp. Thank goodness for the Lions and the Lionesses, and we needed a director, and of course I decided that would be for me. So I've been there.
Amazing. Now, Lynn, yeah. what was it like as you were sort of going through this process of this amazing idea and making it a reality?
Well, I mean, I was joking earlier. It's just that I knew where every sewer was, where every pole was going to be, where every building was going to be. But the vision of being able to have a place where our young people could go in a total risk-free environment and learn about the outdoors and have a camp experience with people who would really understand their learning disability was what we wanted to see. And so it was just such a great vision, and it was a pleasure to be involved with the Lions. And even though I used to joke with them about where the hydro poles were going to be and everything else and what beds we were going to have and what cabins, it's a reality now. And it's great that we have a lot of our families who go to that camp. There's one or two other camps that we refer people to, but you know, the experience of having an outdoor camp and having the residents, and a lot of our people who are on staff now have at one point worked in Camp Kirk.
Is that right?
And I think that
didn't want to leave.
They did not want to leave. You know, they went, they took on the experience, and they're now working throughout our organization all across the province, and it's so wonderful, and I'm just so pleased that it's still there, that we've got it, and the experience that our young people have there.
It's also a really neat thing to see the affinity and the strength between the two organizations, and to me it's a very, very crucial point, because as Lynn mentioned earlier, you know, learning disabilities are invisible, and there's so many myths and misnomers about learning disabilities and ADD and ADHD, and all focus on generally are the negatives, like the Ritalin and all of that kind of stuff, when there's so much positive stuff going on. You know, LDAO, for instance, is doing a wonderful, wonderful job in terms of early detection, and that in itself is a huge, huge contribution to our society. And us at Camp Kirk, we're just a drop in the bucket, but you know what? It's not a numbers game. If we can help one child, it's been worth everything that we've put out. And
get involved.
Well, it's a long story, but you know, one of the things that Lynn was talking about earlier affected me profoundly, in that I found out I had a learning disability once I got involved with this.
So you didn't know?
I didn't know. I knew I learned differently. I knew I was terrible in school. I failed every which way I could possibly fail. And what saved my life was camp. And so when a friend of mine contacted me to be involved with the project, I absolutely jumped, and I thought, this is absolutely what I need to do, and this is what I want to do, and so that it's the rest, as they say, is history. But yeah, I mean,
tell us about the camp. How big is it?
It's very small. We only service 36 children at a time, and
so
we have
it's
a
very
staff
small
of
ratio?
Yes, it is. We have 29 staff for 36 kids.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it's almost one-on-one, and we focus primarily on not so much that we're ignoring the learning disabilities portion, or the ADD or ADHD, but or ADD or ADHD, but what we try and do is focus on the children's abilities. and we try to
What a
figure
great
out.
way- What a great way to put it.
We try to figure out their strengths, and then we boost
Right.
them like crazy.
And, through school, they must spend so much time concentrating on what's wrong with them.
Well, yes, and they're competing continuously, and unfortunately they're failing, and they're failing, and they're failing, and you can only fail so much. And then so a lot of the times we get little kids that come to us with very, very low self-esteem, and our mission is to boost them. And if we can only find one thing that they feel good about themselves, then that can be transposed into so many other areas of their lives, and it's a wonderful process to watch, and it works. It absolutely works.
Why do you think it works? How does it work?
How does it work? Because you take a child, for instance, who comes to camp the first year. I remember one in particular who barely spoke a word for the first 10 and 15 days that he was at camp, just because he just couldn't get it out. He couldn't use his words. And then one day I realized that this child loved music, and every time I sang a song, or we played music or sing songs, this child became totally animated. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, this little guy really loves music. And all of a sudden he started to sing. And progressively he sang more and more, and he became more and more verbal, and next thing we knew, he was in front of the dining hall, and he was able to sing for everyone and talk and speak. And so, that's just one story. I mean, I could tell you hundreds of stories like this. You're going to meet a young man later on, Nick, and he was, he's a wonderful, wonderful kid, and he's now 15 years old. He was at the camp for, I don't know how many years, 5 or 6 years perhaps. And, the changes in him.
A very articulate young man.
Yes,
I've talked to him before
absolutely. The show. And so, it works. I don't know. We call it the magic of Camp Kirk.
And you talked about the self-esteem issue with people with disabilities.
As Henri said, is that finding their strengths. And if you can find one activity, one hobby, one talent that they have, and using that for everything that they do, it'll make such a big difference. And for some, it takes them a while to find it. But once
how do you identify
And
it?
once you click, you try programs like this, you try some of our programs, you talk it through, you'll say, eventually you'll find out what that one strength is. With my one son, it's his organizational skills. He is so organized, so where does he work? In a mailroom.
Isn't that interesting?
So, so you figure out, you've got to find that strength, and everyone has a strength. Everybody. And I think in this activity, because the ratio is small, they are with other people who are similar to themselves, but they can still have that competitive edge, they can still feel that they can do things that are different, and no one's going to what's the word, make a decision that they're not doing it the right way.
That's right.
There's a right, wrong.
No, there isn't. They progress at their own pace. Most of what we do, in fact, pretty much everything we do at camp is totally non-competitive.
So what are some of the activities?
Well, we have, for instance, a ropes course, a challenge ropes course, and with rock wall climbing and high ropes elements, which is, for some of them, very, very challenging.
I was going to say, I was never good at that stuff when I was a kid.
We also have martial arts, which is a wonderful activity for concentration and focusing and so on. And we have archery, and I know a lot of parents look at you and say, archery? Are you kidding? Yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful. The kids love to do archery. We do drama, which is also a very good activity for these children to be able to express themselves and learn to gain more and more self-assurance and whatnot. And of course we have recreational swimming, and we send them out on overnights and canoe trips and things like
now,
that.
This isn't generally a very long camping experience.
Well,
right?
we have 2 10-day sessions and 2 2-week sessions, and some children come for multiple sessions.
Okay. But how do you take that experience? I mean, you're dealing with kids more on a day-to-day basis. How do you take that camping experience and translate it into a change that's going to last?
Well, there's a good example. For instance, if a child learns to become more self-sufficient at camp and more independent and more aware, self-aware, where that child might have had a difficulty in putting up their hand at school and say, excuse me, ma'am, excuse me, sir, I have this idea, or whatever, or answer simply a question. They might have not been able to do that, but all of a sudden, because of the experience that they've had at camp, where they realize that, what, I can do this, I'm a somebody. They go back to school and they say, hey, I have an idea, hear me out. And that changes their lives.
Now, Lynn, we talked so much about that. We're just about out of time. Again, I want to go back. If someone is watching and they think that it would be so great for them to contact the Learning Disabilities Association of York Region, what do they do?
They pick up the phone and they call 905-884-7933, and someone will be at the other end of the line.
That's great. Thank you so much for
You're
joining us,
welcome.
Henri. I know you're going to be staying on.
Right.
We're going to be
pleasure.
right back after this break.